that work in the programming department here at Vegas PBS. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight and for sending in your questions to our amazing panel. We hope you enjoyed this special screening of 9 to 5, The Story of a Movement. To see it again, you can tune in to Vegas PBS Channel 10 this Sunday, February 7th at 11 p.m. Or you can stream it free to our website until March 3rd at vegaspbs.org. I'm now honored to introduce your host for the evening, Erika Washington, Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada, a policy-driven organization that supports Black women and women of color here in Las Vegas. She's been serving our community since 2008 with her work in journalism, activism, and policy change. Erika, we're so grateful to have you here tonight, and Miss Claytee White as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melody. I am so excited to be here. I have the honor of not only being the executive director of Make It Work Nevada, but also I am on the board of 9 to 5. I would like to introduce my co-host almost. I think we're going to chat it up. We are certainly, I don't even know if we're equals because Claytee is a legend. But Claytee, who is the director, Oral History Research Center at UNLV Libraries. She is the inaugural director at UNLV Libraries. In this position, she collects the history of Las Vegas and the surrounding area by gathering memories of events and experiences from longtime residents. Two of the many significant projects includes the Las Vegas African American Experience and One October. Claytee received her Master of Arts degree in history from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and engaged in additional graduate work at the College of William and Mary. She has also written several book chapters, journal articles, and presented oral history papers at national conferences from Atlanta to Maui. A native of, I cannot pronounce it, in North Carolina. I will have her do it so I don't slaughter it. She also serves as the chair of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission, VP of Women of Diversity, and advisory board member for blackpast.org and the Mob Museum. So welcome, Claytee. Please first pronounce the name of your hometown that I was going to slaughter very bad.
My hometown is Ahoskie.
Ahoskie.
Yes. It's a Native American term.
And what is that close to?
It's close to, depending upon how much you know that area, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, or Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. And so when did you come to Las Vegas?
Came to Las Vegas in 1992.
Okay, very cool. I made it here in 2008. So
okay.
It's become home, and I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad to have met you. I've learned so much over the years from you. But I wanted to start with talking about 9 to 5. Both of us had a chance to see the movie a little bit ahead of time, but we haven't had a chance to talk about what you thought of the movie. So what did you think?
So I like the way it captured the movement. But I have to be very honest. I had never heard of that movement before. I did not know anything about 9 to 5. So it shows that it was never in my environment. And it wasn't as if I lived in Ahoskie, North Carolina. I did not. At the time of the movement, I was living in places like Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. So there's no reason that I should not have known about the movie, about this movement. So it means that it did not include me. It did not include women who looked like me, because at one time in those years, I was working in a clerical office in Los Angeles. But I heard nothing about the movement.
Well, in one part of the movie that really stood out to me, they talked about organizing Black women. I think it was in Boston, and they said that they were having a hard time. And a part of that was they asked the question, well, have you talked to them? Do you have lunch with them? Do your kids play with them? And they said no, and they didn't know how to talk to them. And so I think that was a glaring moment right there that I wish they really would have dived deeper into. It almost felt like they sort of glossed over it and just said, yeah, we just didn't know how. And so we had a few Black ladies, so we had them do it. And it's like, well, where's that disconnect that you don't know how to have you don't know how to have the conversation when you have to know that they were having the same and even worse experiences within the workplace.
That's correct. And I think that it should go both ways. It should be a connection between white women toward Black women, and at this time it was just Black and white, and Black women toward white women. I have a feeling that in a lot of cases, it's a one-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to do better. Mm-hmm. Today, I think we're doing better. I look around where I work, I think we're doing better. And maybe this was the era. This was a time frame. We're talking about the 70s, early 80s. So maybe we're talking about a time when women did not communicate very well with each other across that intersection of race. Maybe we just didn't at that time. You think we're doing better now?
You know, yeah, I mean, yes and no. I feel like the question of are we doing better? I think it's a matter of, I don't know that we ever knew how bad it was, because people didn't talk about it. I think back to my childhood. I remember watching the movie 9 to 5, and, you know, I love Dolly Parton and all of that. And I remember watching Baby Boom, you know, so my whole 80s mindset of I wanted to be a working woman. I wanted to be wearing my easy spirits and walking down the street. I was going to move to New York and I was going to be hustling and bustle. That just looked like the life to me. And even in that, you know, you go back and you watch some of those movies and you can certainly see, like in Baby Boom and other movies, that, you know, the women weren't necessarily treated equally, or they felt like they had to hustle even harder. And there weren't a lot of Black women in these movies, you know, either. But I think of like my grandmother saying, you know, you're so smart. You're such a smart girl. You can grow up and be a secretary. Like that was, you know, where she saw success. And you know, she worked in department stores and she was also domestic. She did, you know, different things. She never talked about sexual harassment. She never talked about any of the things. I'm assuming that it probably happened, but it just wasn't talked about. And I think a lot of things was just like, oh, well, that's just the way men are. And we've had this line of boys will be boys, or, you know, just whatever it is. Even if someone felt, you know, attacked. There was another point in the movie where the woman said something to the effect of that the man who was trying to hire her said that you would have to date me. And they said, did he use the word date? And she said, no. But even now, in retelling that story, she still didn't say what he said. And so we can conjure up, you know, an image of what was said there. But the fact that she still didn't feel comfortable saying it says a lot about all the things that haven't been said. And I think that it's hard to say whether or not it's better. I think we're a lot more open about it. We have the Me Too movement, which I think really showcases just how rampant and blatant the sexual harassment and sexual assault that women have encountered over the years in the workplace.
Exactly. And I think we do a disservice in a way. We are using 2021 thinking for 1970, 1980. Mm-hmm. So I think we're doing a disservice to the women of that era, mm-hmm. in a way. We didn't know how to talk about sexual harassment at that time. None of us did. Mm-hmm. So I don't expect them, and I don't expect women from that era to use that 4-letter word that we would use so freely today to describe it. They just didn't use that terminology. But there were women of that era, though, who would talk about it. I've done interviews where women have said what you just said. Oh, boys will be boys. Oh, I just slapped his hand and just went on about my business. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things that Black women said. So when I interviewed Black women right here in the gaming industry, maids making up beds in private rooms in hotels, those are the kinds of things they said. Oh, I would just tell him, oh, just get out of my way. And I would just keep on doing my work. So women saw themselves differently, and they were not a part of any kind of movement like that.
Yeah.
They just took care of it themselves.
Yeah. You make me think about something else that I thought of watching it the first time. You know, I think a lot about Ruby Duncan. I am probably one of her biggest fans, if not her biggest fan. And which I knew nothing about her before I moved to Las Vegas, which was such a disservice to my whole, you know, education growing up into, you know, women's movement and Black history and just history overall. But, you know, Ruby Duncan, you know, formed Operation Life, and then they had a march on the Strip, and they called it Storming Caesar's Palace, where they shut down Caesar's Palace. And this was around welfare rights for Black mothers, but it wasn't just Black mothers. There were a lot of white mothers that were also benefiting from this. She is the reason why we have the WIC offices here that we do. But she had worked on the Strip in the hotels. And it makes me think about the women in the 9 to 5 movie, the secretaries. What would have been like if they would have joined forces with a Ruby Duncan, with the welfare rights, with just domestics looking for respect as well. And I think there's just a lot of segregated silos in which we don't necessarily feel like we have something in common, when we could have had a stronger movement all the way around if we were including all different types of occupations. Because sexual harassment, certainly, as you said, is happening, you know, with domestic workers, and, you know, and then welfare women were also trying to get the rights they deserve, because when it comes down to it, it's really just about dignity, right? They were all wanting dignity and respect for the job they were doing, and they wanted to be paid a fair wage, and they wanted to have the benefits that they deserved, and they didn't want to be treated like, you know, their boss's wives or what have you.
That's correct. And women who were working in the back of the house as maids and in linen rooms and all of those kinds of things, those women were, you're correct, they were isolated completely from the women who were working in the secretarial pools right down the halls from them. So they were right there, sometimes in the same facility, but they lived in two different worlds. There was no integration at that time. And so another reason that we can't change what happened in that movie, or we can't think about that film from our vantage point today. Today, we still have systemic racism. We still have it today. We still have pay that's not equal today. The same thing that these women were fighting for. But we wanted those women to integrate at that time. It could have never happened. And the women who were on welfare, who participated in the welfare rights movement, they were fighting for a lot of different things. The face of the movement was an African-American face, a Black face. Other women were too ashamed to march up and down Las Vegas Boulevard at that time for that cause. But they reaped the benefits of everything that the Black women were able to accomplish.
Yeah, there is a lot of shame in the word poor or in poverty.
Yes.
And I think we need to come away from that, because, you know, we're all, you know, a few steps away from it. And if anything, this pandemic has certainly shown that, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to really have our whole foundation crumble underneath us. And welfare is meant to be a social insurance that protects us from falling too far, you know, too far down. So instead of thinking of it as something shameful, instead of thinking of it as an insurance to help protect us like any other insurance, I think that's partially what holds us back from really seeing one another and seeing, you know, someone who is on welfare. At one point, you know, I am a mother of 3. I'm a single mother of 3. And at one point I was a WIC recipient. I was also a food stamp recipient and a Medicaid recipient. And I would not have, I would not be where I am today if I would not have had those things, because my now 17-year-old daughter required a very special formula that was, I want to say $38 a can. That was just not something, even now that would just be absolutely devastating to my bottom line, right? And so, and now she is a freshman in college and all of the things. So I am grateful to that formula. I am grateful to the welfare system that helped me make it through those times. And that's what it's for, and so spending less time talking about, who's on it and how they're abusing it, and instead of looking at it as a way to lift us up, to help us from being worse off and homeless or what have you, and moving up, I think is a better way to look at it. It also made me think about Jane Fonda, and we talked a little bit about this because anybody who knows anything about Stormy Caesar's Palace knows that Jane Fonda was there marching along with Ruby Duncan. And then she's also, one of the reasons this movie 9 to 5 got made, the original movie 9 to 5, and then probably this documentary as well. But she was instrumental in so many different ways. And so I wonder if she ever thought at all to connect the two. That would be a great question to ask. If I ever get a chance to ask Jane Fonda, I want to know, did you think about, having them join forces?
That would have been a wonderful question to ask, to see if she would, if even someone like Jane Fonda, who thought like she, the kind of thinker that she is and was, to see if she had ever even thought of that would be so interesting. Mm-hmm. Because she could have bridged the divide at that time. So it would really, really be interesting to know that. I also liked about the film. I liked women organizing. I liked to see, yes, it wasn't inclusive enough, but I liked the organizational skills that they just built. They learned, they went to places for seminars or whatever, and they learned how to do it. And then they put it in effect. And they just step by step, these women who were secretaries and in a typing pool are now on the front lines, and they're talking in front of all of these groups. So that's what I liked seeing about that, because any movement can become more powerful using some of these strategies and techniques.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people all the time that organizing has the most transferable skills, I think, of anything, because if you can hone in on the craft of talking to people, especially to strangers, yes, strangers to open up to you about their issues and their problems, and then advocating for and helping to write legislation and or just testify, like all these things. I mean, it's always scary to stand up in front of a group of people and talk, and so to do it over and over and over again, and having to write the letters and having to like pivot on a dime because things change, and and then having to get up so early or work so late, like there's just so much that you get from it. So that's my little plug to anybody who wants to volunteer and come organize with Make It Work Nevada. You will get some transferable skills that you can use elsewhere and also change policy for the long term. But was there anything else in the movie that stood out to you that you or that you think or maybe should have been talked about a little bit more?
Definitely that it was a white movement. That was the thing that was glaring. Mm-hmm. And I guess anything else that I thought they should have done, I don't think any other really major critiques of it. Mm-hmm. I admired the movement. I thought it was too narrow. I liked the way it was in different cities. So they were able to take this to a national level, not all cities, but a lot of cities. So that said a lot for the movement there as well.
I wonder if, oh no, go ahead.
No. So that, I like that it was national.
Mm-hmm. You know, because they tried to form a union, you know, and then that didn't work. I wonder if they wouldn't have tried to form a union, if they would have just tried to just spread out to more cities, if that would have been helpful in the long term. I wonder if that took some of the wind out of their sails, I guess, when that happened.
I don't know, because I thought when they started talking about forming a union, I was thinking in the back of my mind, the Culinary Workers Union, Local 226, right here in Las Vegas. And the reason I thought about that is because it was female-led early on. Mm. And that union was one of the most powerful ones in the area, probably in the country at one time. So I saw that as a way for this movement to gain power. And because then they had a right to strike. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was going to make a difference. And I'm cheering for them as they go out on strike and then it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that they talked about, I think it was a Pan Am or something strike that happened around the same time. And I think that it didn't necessarily, they said it didn't necessarily help when they were trying to organize. But I think overall, they really, they did a lot, you know, mm-hmm. in a short amount of time. I give them a whole lot of credit for that, even though it felt very, you know, homogenous and it didn't include so many women because, you know, not just Black women, but other women of color. And I know that is going back to what you said, thinking about how folks were thinking in the early 1970s and mid 1970s, that it just wasn't happening. But at the same time, you know, we had just gotten through, you know, the beginning of the civil rights movement and all of that, that it is still hard for me. And I realized because I was born after this, to how they didn't see the similarities of what folks were fighting for in the 50s and 60s around civil rights with Black folks, and then going into women's movement and what have you, why it wasn't automatically more intersectional, even though they didn't necessarily have all of the tools.
So here in Las Vegas, not only was there a women's movement when it comes to Black women's movement, when it comes to welfare rights, but I just said something a few minutes ago about the Culinary Union. Mm-hmm. The Culinary Union had some of the most powerful strikes in the country right here. And a lot of those strikes were led by women. Those women who were working in the back of the house, they joined the Culinary Union, giving them the freedom to, yes, I didn't like the flamingo that much, but it meant that I'm still a member of the union, and they sent me to the Desert Inn right away. And there I had a job, and that supervisor I really got along with. So that Culinary Union gave them such freedom, and then it gave them power. Hattie Canty was a woman who came here with like a 6th, 8th grade education. Mm-hmm. In about 10 years, she was president, the first female president of the Culinary Union. So we don't just have Ruby Duncan doing things and leading a movement and being an activist. We have Hattie Canty, first president of the Culinary Union. So you're very right. If we could have put that movement together with clerical workers here in Las Vegas, and there could be other cities like us around the country, mm-hmm. It would have been so powerful. Mm-hmm. But we are looking at we were looking at it from today's perspective.
Yeah. So then I guess I wonder, how do we keep from missing the mark now? So, you know, we are obviously more intersectional, you know, our organization, Make It Work Nevada, we organize and we center Black women, but we include all women because we know that if we start with folks that are most in the margins, that the ripple effect that it will affect all folks, that they will have better you know, policies around paid sick days and paid family leave, things like that. But you know, looking, you know, 30 to 50 years later after this, what are people going to come and have a Zoom conversation about and say, well, she said she was doing all of these things. How did she miss this mark? So how do we widen our vision so that we are actually doing it right, so that we actually win? And we're actually not talking about this 30 years from now, because with the ERA, the movement for that in the 70s, the fact that it wasn't passed in Nevada until 2017, and I worked on that, and it, like, that boggles my mind that I was working on something that should have been done before I was even, you know, conceived. So how do we make sure we're not still talking about equal pay and sexual harassment 30 years from now?
So what we have to do, I think, is we have to change some of our systems. We have to rework them. Right now, we have systemic racism, which means that we have problems in housing, education, criminal justice, healthcare, you name the system in this country. So why don't we just rebuild the entire system? I don't want any police department to be defunded. Not like most people think, most people accept that term as meaning. I want our police departments to be better trained, and some of the funding used in mental health at the same time. So I want all of it done. I don't want just a piece of it. I want the whole criminal justice system when it comes to bails, all of that. I want all of it changed. Erika, I don't think we can, 30 years from now, in order for us to see a difference, we have to change something structurally. When I look back at the civil rights movement, we're getting ready to go through the same kind of a movement again. So we need to do it right. And not just civil rights, but let's do the whole thing. Let's do women's rights. Let's change our system. Let's change the way we think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, I think if we don't get to the root of it, if something is rotten, we've got to dig it out through the root, and we have to replant some seeds and start over. And I think that sounds really hard to a lot of folks. I mean, because it is hard. It's not an easy thing to do.
Right. So how would we change employment? So women don't earn what they should earn. And we've seen those statistics now for years and years. How do we change it?
Ooh, I think one of the things that starts with is pay transparency. I think it starts with whatever a job is worth to be done is what should be posted. Like, this is what the job entails. These are the job duties. These are the requirements. This is how much we're paying. That we're not so lenient with all of these large pay scales, because sometimes those pay scales, people will base that off of what you made at a previous job. And if you are always being underpaid, then you're going to continue to be underpaid. I also think that we not sell ourselves short with what care work costs and what care work actually entails and what qualifications folks have. Having 3 children you know, I can say that my skills are so much sharper in a lot of ways that I use in my job because I have these children. And that should be included. That is also a part of my whole skill set, because if you're looking at the whole person and everything that they're bringing, including their experience, not just education, not just which school they went to, but the whole thing, the whole person, then, you know, you're going to have more equity there, because then you're looking at more than just someone who was able to go to an Ivy League, or someone who, you know, has a private school education over a public school or what have you. And then also, if we stop looking at gender or color or sexual identity, gender identity as a box to check, and more as a benefit, because you're also gaining a whole lot of different life skills and life experience, I should say, that will bring more to your organization, more to your business, because you have this plethora of people, this rainbow coalition of sorts. I think that when we think about care work, again, folks who stay home and take care of their children, folks who take care of their parents, and all of those things, that those things need to be honored and valued too. You know, you think about some of the jobs that women may take, you know, they earn less because they're looked at as less than. You know, there's a reason why there's always been more women teachers, and then yet teachers don't make enough money. You know, same with daycare providers. You know, you have someone taking care of your children, they should be making a whole lot more. They should be making more money than me, because you're doing something that I really don't even really want to do, you know, not for 9 hours a day, every single day, with multiple children, doing all of these different things at the same time. That is hard work. Like, I like my children, but I don't know that I want to do it for everyone else's children. And I don't expect everyone else to think my children are the greatest either. So pay them well so that they will do well.
This conference will now be recorded.
So you know that I work for UNLV.
Yes.
So UNLV is part of the system of higher education in all of Nevada. So it's called INSHE. So the INSHE system is changing the way we search for people. If you're on a search committee, there are certain qualifications that you have to look for. There are certain techniques and skills now used on a search committee that were never used before. So you actually have to have some kind of a short training if you're going to be on a search committee, because now you have to look at all kinds of categories that you did not have to look at before. So we want to change. We want to UNLV is supposed to be daring, diverse, and different. So we're going to make that come true. But I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how to start that with a private firm. How do you start that with MGM, Caesars, all of these private companies that we have here in Nevada? How do we do that from, or carry that same thinking over into those private companies? Because that's where it's going to have to start.
Yeah, I think, you know, only thing we can ask for is that we have to have folks that are in these positions of power to use that power for good and not evil, I guess, you know, and really think, you know, harder about how they can be more inclusive, and where, if we all, I mean, it's, you know, we all have to do it. We all have to think about what our personal biases are and how we move past that, and think about who are we leaving out of the conversation, even if it doesn't feel intentional. Because I think that's also a lot of it when we start talking about discrimination, and we start talking about racism or prejudice, you know, people get very defensive very quickly. It's like, no, that's not me. I don't do this. I have Black friends, all the things. But that doesn't mean that you don't have biases, that you don't necessarily look past somebody because they don't look like you, or you've never talked to someone that way, or you don't assume that somebody who went to this school or that school or no school at all could possibly do a job. And so, you know, it's a challenge. And I think it goes back to things being hard but we can do hard things, if we try, and if we give ourselves the space to learn and not assume that we know best, because we're all just hopefully perpetual learners, that we're all spending that time, trying to sharpen our own skills. And those skills are not just academic, but also just social.
And I think those skills can be changed starting with kindergarten, starting with the family. We have to do more. We have to do better. And those definitions, I don't even know what all of that is, but we have to start including all of us at those basic levels, at the ground level of a family, having a child. So the medical care has to change. Sending that child to school, the schools have to change. And maybe we even should look at our churches, synagogues, temples, and all of that. If we really are those spiritual people that we say we are, why aren't we practicing all of that?
I don't have the answer to that question either. I think that I mean, we all just have to do better.
Yes,
one of the things that we have tried really hard to do when we're talking to folks about policy, when we're talking to legislators about policy, is being inclusive when it comes to the word family. That a family looks very different for everyone. That is not, the traditional nuclear family of husband, wife, and 2 kids, dog, picket fence, what have you. A family could be same gender. A family could be no children. I tell folks all the time when we talk about pay sick days and pay family leave for sure, when you need to take time off to care for a loved one, and having that opportunity to do so, it shouldn't be restricted to just your immediate family, your children, or your husband or wife. It should be for whomever you love, right? So I have a cousin who lives in Detroit that I would drop everything for and fly across to take care of, without a doubt, but if you look at the bloodline, like it's, this, that removed over here, what have you, but I am so close to her that, it doesn't matter. And I shouldn't have to explain that to somebody and explain why. It's just like, this is my person, and I want to be there for them, for whatever they may need. And I think that, because also blood doesn't necessarily make family either, right? You have great friends that, you may want to nurse back to health, and you want to be there, and you don't have to think about whether or not I'm still going to have my job when I come back, when I should have some paid time off because I've earned it, to take care of my family. And I'm more likely to stay at a job if someone can understand that, this is a big part of me as well. So thinking about what family means, and what being a human being is outside of work, that is also really important to think about. And I think that's probably not something that the women in the movie were thinking about, back then, or even thinking about childcare for that matter. Most of these women didn't have children. And if they were having children, they weren't allowed to come back to work in a lot of situations. And so, in that way, we have come, very far. But at the same time, childcare costs more than the tuition at the school that you work for, and so that boggles my mind. So there's still so many workplace policies that we need to tackle. And I think childcare is included in that workplace policy, because as many folks know now, especially with school being out or school being online.
Oh, yes.
And so many daycare centers have closed that we don't have access to the childcare that we need. And even beforehand, a lot of it was just not accessible because it was out of reach in regards to affordability. And that keeps people down. That keeps women down, especially from being able to take the jobs or take the promotion or what have you, because they don't have the childcare.
Exactly. But you were earlier when you were talking about taking care of a friend, a relative across the country that you are so close to, you're describing a world that works for everyone. And we don't have that world. We're not even close to that world. We don't even think about a world that works for everyone. We think about ourselves and we think about our little silos that we live in, and we don't give a lot of thought to people in other countries, people in other fields of work. We're really kind of isolationist.
Mhm.
We are afraid of people coming across a border. So when we say a world that works for everyone, that's a statement that we really don't honor. We want everybody to look like us, think like us, act like us, and if not, we're not on board. We saw that in the film, and we know that that was a shortcoming of the film, but it's a shortcoming of all of us. Cross generations, cross the decades, we still have that same shortcoming.
Mhm, mhm. So we had a question come in that I wanted to clarify, and they asked if we had a local 9-to-5 organization.
Okay.
We don't actually have a local 9-to-5 chapter here. 9-to-5 is a national organization. They are based in Atlanta, in Georgia. They also have folks in Wisconsin and in Colorado. And the new ED, executive director, her name is Ling Ling Chansey. She is the first woman of color to run 9-to-5. And she is a Chinese immigrant and a very good friend of mine. And she has been working hard to still really dismantle some of the pillars of white supremacy within these organizations, and they are working on a plethora of issues, including paid leave and affordable childcare. I am on the board of the National 9-to-5, so that is what I was referring to. If folks got confused, I'm sorry, but there are still ways to get involved with 9-to-5 nationally. And folks are able to reach out to me directly. And I will give my information, when we close out, and also reach out to 9-to-5 directly as well. There's always opportunities to, especially now, everything is virtual. There's always different ways in which to get involved. But Ling Ling is an amazing leader, and she is doing some amazing work with 9-to-5, especially as we really dive into quality, affordable childcare. She is wanting to push for some, federal and state policies that will help, working women, especially those who are underserved and hourly workers, those folks who were considered essential workers, but not really considered essential workers, those still running, working in the grocery stores and the fast food restaurants, those hourly folks who, kept things running for folks when we were mostly shut down.
Yes, and still doing it. So you said Georgia, Wisconsin, and Colorado. Why those three? Why not? Why isn't it more broad than that at this point?
That's a good question that I cannot answer, but I will get back to you and try to answer that question. I think, they were in Wisconsin. Ellen Bravo, who was in the movie, they only show her a couple of times. There was like a Phil Donahue clip where she says, they got the name from us. That's Ellen Bravo. She is a longtime women's rights advocate, and she ran 9-to-5 at one point. And she is in Wisconsin, and I think that was just a good fertile ground for them which to organize in, as well as Georgia. Colorado, I'm not sure exactly how Colorado got in the mix, but Colorado has been doing some really interesting things, and they just actually passed a ballot measure this past election cycle to make paid leave make it a state mandate. And so if I'm not mistaken, and I might be completely wrong here because I don't have this in my notes written down, but I believe it goes into effect in 2024, 2025, the actual implementation of it. And so they're still working on, some of the parameters, but the voters did vote to pass for there to be paid family leave in the state of Colorado. And that was, a lot of that work was led by a large coalition of, I think, about 100 different organizations and businesses, but 9 to 5 was a major leader in doing that. But these things are expensive. Millions and millions of dollars go into ballot initiatives in order to get these things passed. And it still just boggles my mind, again, that we have to spend millions of dollars to get some policies that just make sense.
Yes. At one time, at one time we could have a referendum and those kinds of things that could start at the grassroots. I don't know if those still work or not, because you wouldn't be able to have that kind of money behind it. So I don't know if that would work. And to increase salaries. So paid leave, I like that. But why not a bill like that? Why couldn't we do equal pay at the same time? Is that too much to ask?
I don't think it's too much to ask.
Okay, good. Good.
Now, what our elected officials might think is too much to ask, I think is a different story. And I think we spend a lot of time trying to live in the future. We don't know what's going to happen with this election. We don't know what's going to happen over here. We want to play it safe instead of just doing the things that we need. I think that there's just, it's really frustrating. And sometimes, honestly, it's just really disappointing just how scared we are to do what people call radical, which to me is not necessarily radical, but just regular stuff so that everyone can live their version of the American dream.
That's
so
right.
That everyone has, a strong foundation. What this pandemic showed is that our foundation was not strong. When people started talking about getting back to normal didn't work. And we weren't doing all that great if it didn't take but less than a month for everything to just like crumble up under us and not having the infrastructure. It just wasn't there. So how do we make sure that it is there so that if something terrible happens again, because something else will happen. It's always something, right? When it rains, it pours, all these different things, that if we had paid sick days, and people were able to take the time off they needed to get well and didn't have to worry about, I'm not going to have a paycheck and I'm going to go to work, sick, we might have been able to control some of the things. I also think that, if we had paid family leave and people were able to take the time off and care for their folks, who were sick, not just with the coronavirus, but, whatever, ailment there was. I think if we had quality, affordable childcare, if we had a good, strong structure in our school system, that we would have been able to pivot better, because we would have had more resources and we would have been able, all the folks who didn't have access to internet, that wouldn't have been a thing. If we have some of the basics, besides just food and water, there are just so many things that we just need to do better, and we need to be prepared. We need to have our go kits ready at the federal and the state level.
Well, it was ready. They dismantled it.
True.
Because we went through a couple of other pandemics that were so minor here in this country that they put the playbook together for how to handle a pandemic. But because a new administration comes in, how do we stop an administration from dismantling the good things? And who's going to identify and define what good is?
Yeah.
So I don't know how we go from here if the next administration is just going to come behind this one and dismantle everything, and then the next one has to do it over. We have to change some policies at the national level as well as the state level. So Erika, you have your work cut out for you. And all of the policy work that you are doing.
Oh, yeah. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
I am, and to wrap things up here, I think that I'll say first and foremost that I'm grateful. I am grateful to do this work. I did not know this was a job when I was wanting to wear my easy spirits and run around and be a business lady. I didn't know that, I could get paid to advocate for women to have the lives that they want to lead. I didn't know I could get paid to be proud to be a Black woman and to be proud of my history and to make my grandma proud, hopefully from above. I didn't know that I could help shape the futures of my children in this way so that they could have a better life and that they could have protections that I didn't have, that my grandmother and great grandmothers just didn't have. And so, it is hard. It is frustrating. It will break your heart. This work will literally break your heart, but I couldn't ask for a better job and I couldn't ask for a better team. And to be able to do this, I think the only other thing I would like to do is probably your job, because I didn't know that was a thing either when I was young and wanted to read all the things and learn all the history and talk to everybody and let them tell me their stories. I was a journalist at one point, but that's different than, you being able to collect that way and just listen. I'm just like, oh man, nobody told me I could do that. So maybe I'll do that.
Me either. I was just in the right place at the right time and said yes. So, and that's what we have to do sometimes. It wasn't planned.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. And can you tell folks, if they want more information about any of the knowledge you dropped around the history of the unions and all of that, how would they talk to you and how would they learn more?
Well, let me just email me and we can get in touch. It's claytee.white@unlv.edu. And if you email me, I'll get back in touch. We can talk, we can have coffee. You might be someone who is primed for an interview, so I will interview you. So yes, this is my job, to collect the history and the experiences of people right here in Southern Nevada. So yes, please just give me just claytee.white@unlv.edu. Yeah.
I appreciate that so much. And she will actually answer your email. She answered mine, and I think that she will answer yours too. And if anyone is interested in being a part of the Make It Work Nevada squad, if you're interested in economic, racial, or reproductive justice issues, if you have a story, we have a link on our website, makeitworknevada.org. There's a link there for you to tell us your story. If you have a story about paid family leave or sexual harassment, we want to hear those stories too, because I am a firm believer in telling our stories and not being ashamed at all of the things that we have gone through, the things that we are currently going through, because those are things that help collectively organize us for a better future. And as we are in just now starting this legislative session here in Nevada, there are a host of bills that we will be working on, supporting, some maybe even pushing back on. And if you are interested in learning more about those bills, email me, Erika, ERIKA, at makeitworknevada.org. Or you can also go to our website, and there's there's a link there as well for you to reach out to us, to reach out to the team. If there's any way that you want to get involved, and if you want to know more about 9 to 5, please reach out. I will connect you with Ling Ling and her team, and we can, see if we can get a chapter here as well. I'm sure we can talk her into it. I can't run it. I'm busy, but somebody out here, I'm hoping, might want to get involved. There's just so many things that, everyone can do. And hopefully from this movie that people at least got that and saw that, it could be scary, but it is certainly possible. And if we do it collectively, we will actually win.
And thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful, wonderful talking to you.
Yes, I had such a good time. I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate Melody as well.
Of course, yes.
I'm so appreciative to both of you. I know you said right place, right time, and I just said yes, and I'm just so grateful you guys said yes tonight. You know, this has been an amazing conversation. We're so grateful for you for watching the film and then coming to talk to us about how it can impact people here locally, how it's still going on today. It's just, these are great. These are great conversations, and we're going to keep having them. And I hope everybody enjoyed the event tonight. Thank you to the audience for the questions that came in. And this movie is going to air on Channel 10 this Sunday at 11 p.m. for anybody who missed it. You could also stream it on our website, vegaspbs.org, all the way up until March 3rd. And I hope you'll take a few minutes to click the link in the chat box. That is for our survey and really lets us know how we did and how we can do better. And our next event for this Indie Lens pop-up is going to be for Mr. Soul. It's a documentary on the variety show called Soul that aired back in the 70s. It celebrated Black arts and politics and culture, and the impacts of that documentary and that show are still very prevalent today. So I'm looking forward to that one. It'll be on February 19th. I hope you'll tune in. And thank you both again for being here with us tonight, and have a good evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.